American tanks had reached a belt of concrete pillboxes on Iwo Jima, but they could not break it. Mines lay under black volcanic sand. Machine gun fire crossed every open approach. Then a 21-year-old Marine named Hershel Williams volunteered to go forward with a flamethrower. The older man in these opening images is Williams himself, remembering the battle more than 70 years later. On February 23, 1945, he was a corporal, 5 feet 6 inches tall, carrying a weapon that made him one of the most visible men on the field. 4 riflemen moved with him and covered his approaches. For the next 4 hours, Williams repeatedly crossed exposed ground, attacked the fortified positions, and returned to his own lines for demolition charges and serviced flamethrowers. What happened next depended on 1 Marine walking toward the fire and on 4 others making sure he had a chance to come back. Iwo Jima was only about 8 square miles, a dark volcanic island roughly 750 miles south of Tokyo. American planners wanted its airfields for fighter escorts and as emergency landing grounds for damaged B-29 bombers returning from raids over Japan. Japanese commanders understood that value and had spent months turning the island into a defensive system. Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi abandoned the idea of defeating the invasion at the waterline. Instead, about 21,000 defenders occupied caves, tunnels, bunkers, artillery positions, and reinforced pillboxes woven through the ground. An emplacement could survive naval shelling, remain silent while Marines passed, and then fire from behind them. The island did not offer the attacker a clean front. It offered overlapping problems hidden under ash, stone, and concrete. Capturing a few yards could mean exposing another position that had been invisible moments earlier. The assault began on February 19, 1945. Marines came ashore beneath Mount Suribachi and found that the loose volcanic sand swallowed boots, wheels, and the blades of earth-moving machines. Vehicles sank where ordinary soil might have supported them. Men trying to dig discovered that the ground slid back into their holes. When the beaches became crowded with troops and supplies, Japanese artillery and mortars struck from concealed positions. The 3rd Marine Division entered the battle after the first waves, and Williams landed on February 21 with the 21st Marines. He had already seen combat on Guam. Nothing there had prepared him for a landscape in which the enemy could disappear into the earth and reappear through another opening. North of the mountain, the struggle continued through airfields, ridges, quarries, and fortified ground that had to be taken position by position. Williams had grown up on a dairy farm in Quiet Dell, West Virginia, the youngest of 11 children. He was born in 1923 and weighed only a few pounds. He knew farm work, family responsibility, and the economy of a place where nothing useful was wasted. He tried to join the Marine Corps in 1942, but was rejected because the service still required greater height. When the standard changed, he enlisted in the Marine Corps Reserve on May 26, 1943. His route toward combat moved through training and Pacific bases rather than any dream of becoming a decorated warrior. The flamethrower became his specialty because fortified positions demanded a weapon that could reach around walls, through apertures, and into spaces ordinary rifle fire could not touch. That assignment carried a brutal logic. A Marine with a fuel tank on his back had to get close, and every defender understood what his equipment meant. By February 23, the American advance had reached ground around the first airfield where tanks were expected to help open a lane. On Iwo Jima, mines, soft sand, and concealed anti-tank positions restricted where the vehicles could travel. The pillboxes were built to survive punishment and cover one another. A tank could fire at a visible embrasure, while another hidden position attacked its flank. Infantry could not simply walk behind the machines when machine guns dominated the gaps. Williams's Medal of Honor citation describes the tanks maneuvering vainly against that network. This was not a shortage of courage among the crews. It was a tactical deadlock created by terrain and construction. Someone had to approach from an angle the pillbox weapons were not designed to cover. Williams offered to attempt it. He would not be unprotected, but his 4-man covering team could not remove the physical burden from his shoulders. 2 of the 4 Marines carried automatic rifles and 2 carried service rifles. Their job was to watch for openings, suppress defenders, and keep enemy soldiers from reaching Williams while he concentrated on the fortifications. The arrangement turned 5 men into one moving system. Williams needed their fire to cross the exposed ground. They needed him to neutralize positions their rifles could not penetrate. Later accounts sometimes compress the action into the image of a single Marine attacking alone. His citation says that he went forward alone, meaning he made the final close approaches with the flamethrower. Yet it also states that 4 riflemen covered him. Williams could choose to expose himself at the point of attack. The riflemen had to keep choosing to remain exposed behind him. 2 of those Marines would be killed, while protecting the movement that later carried only Williams's name on the medal. The flamethrower was heavy before fuel was added, and its useful range was short. It did not turn Williams into a distant gunner. It forced him to study the shape of a position, move close enough to reach it, and decide when burning fuel could have an effect. Williams used the contours of shell-torn ground and the blind sides of the defenses. One official account describes him reaching a pillbox and directing flame through an air vent. Another part of the citation records a Japanese soldier charging with a bayonet from an opening, only for Williams to defeat the attack and continue against the position. These were not one continuous burst of action. They were separate close-range problems, each requiring him to expose the fuel tanks, judge the opening, act, and withdraw before another position found him. The 4-hour duration is as important as any single moment. A flamethrower exhausted its fuel quickly. Williams repeatedly returned to friendly lines, exchanged the empty weapon for a serviced one, collected demolition charges, and went forward again. Each return gave him a chance to understand what he had survived. Each departure required another decision to enter the same field. Smoke shifted, Marines moved, and a position silenced on one side could reveal fire from another. Courage in this form was not a single leap made before the mind could catch up. It was repetition with full knowledge. Williams carried the memory of the previous approach into the next one and still moved. The 4 riflemen repeated their part, rebuilding the covering pattern every time he advanced. The battle was measured in yards, fuel, ammunition, and the shrinking number of men able to continue. The weapon itself should not be romanticized. Flamethrowers were used because caves and concrete positions had made ordinary attacks catastrophically costly, but their effect on human beings was terrible. The defenders were soldiers fighting from a system designed to force Americans into close, exposed approaches. Williams did not invent that system or control the decision to seize the island. He faced the immediate problem. Machine guns were stopping the advance. Tanks could not open the lane, and Marines would continue dying until the strongpoints were neutralized. The moral weight does not disappear when the action is called heroic. Williams accepted intimate violence so others could move. Japanese soldiers defended from positions built for a battle with little expectation of surrender. Iwo Jima brought those realities together at distances where neither side could pretend war was clean, mechanical, or remote. By the time Williams's company could move toward its objective, the young corporal had done more than survive a dangerous assignment. His repeated attacks had helped break one of the strongest defensive points in the regiment's path. If you value carefully sourced stories that keep both the courage and the cost in view, subscribe to Frontline Brief, like this video, and tell us in the comments which decision in Williams's 4-hour fight stands out to you most. Volunteering was one decision. Approaching the first pillbox was another. Returning for a new flamethrower was another. Going back after seeing casualties was another still. The citation later gathered those choices into formal language. On the field, they arrived one at a time, separated by smoke, gunfire, empty fuel tanks, and the knowledge that the next crossing might be the one he did not complete. The same day, Marines raised a second American flag on Mount Suribachi. Joe Rosenthal's photograph would become one of the best-known images of the 20th century. Williams's fight did not take place on that summit, and the flag did not signal that Iwo Jima was secure. The battle continued for more than a month. Nearly 7,000 Americans were killed, and roughly 20,000 were wounded. Most Japanese defenders died. 27 medals of honor were awarded for the campaign, more than for any other single battle in American history. Those numbers explain why one famous photograph cannot contain Iwo Jima. Williams's 4 hours became documented because survivors, commanders, and the citation preserved the chain of events. The archival combat footage around it is real Iwo Jima, but no honest editor can claim that a camera followed his exact path. After the position was opened, Williams remained with the Marines as the battle continued. He did not walk from the pillboxes knowing that a national story had begun. Recognition moved through reports and recommendations from officers who understood what the action achieved. The formal citation emphasized that his determination was directly instrumental in neutralizing a fiercely defended strongpoint and helping his company reach its objective. It also preserved the repeated returns to prepare charges and obtain serviced flamethrowers. That language prevents the event from becoming a vague legend about fearlessness. A stalled line moved because a specific Marine applied a specific skill under sustained fire, while a specific team protected the attempt. History can name the date, unit, terrain, obstacle, duration, support, and outcome. It can also admit where no exact image or complete roster survives. President Harry S. Truman presented Williams with the Medal of Honor at the White House on October 5, 1945. In a photograph from that ceremony, the former farm boy stands as the ribbon is placed around his neck. The image suggests a conclusion: battle, victory, recognition, home. Williams refused that simple ending. He knew the medal rested on the lives of the 4 Marines who had covered him, especially the 2 who died. He later described himself as the caretaker of the medal rather than its sole owner. That belief did not diminish what he had done. It corrected the frame around it. The final close approaches were his, but the opportunity to make them had been purchased by covering fire and sacrifice. A decoration can bear only one name. A battlefield action rarely belongs to one person. Williams spent decades trying to make the public see the men outside the medal photograph. His post-war service lasted far longer than the 4 hours that made him famous. Williams continued in the Marine Corps Reserve and retired as a Chief Warrant Officer 4. He worked for the Veterans Administration, helping former service members navigate the distance between war and civilian life. He spoke to Marines, students, families, and veterans, usually returning the conversation from himself to duty and remembrance. As living World War II veterans declined in number, his face became a bridge between official history and human memory. That is why the moving interview images matter. They are not a reenactment or a generic elderly veteran placed over someone else's story. They show the same Hershel Williams who carried the flamethrower in 1945, now speaking with the accumulated time of a life that continued after the island. Williams also made Gold Star families a central part of his later work. These are families whose service member died in military service, people who live with an absence after public attention moves on. Memorial projects associated with his name created places where their loss could be recognized in local communities. The focus followed from the way he understood his medal. He had been protected by men who did not receive decades of interviews, ship christenings, or public applause. Remembering sacrifice was not an abstract patriotic duty to him. It was a debt with faces behind it. The most meaningful continuation of his Iwo Jima story may therefore be outside combat. A young Marine survived because others covered him. An older veteran used the authority of that survival to direct attention toward families whose loved ones did not return. The weapon disappeared from the center, and responsibility remained. The United States Navy later named an expeditionary sea base for Williams. On Iwo Jima, tanks and heavy weapons had stalled before hidden fortifications, and progress came down to a Marine advancing on foot. Decades later, one of the Navy's largest ships carried that Marine's name. Machines extend reach and power. They do not choose the purpose. The important decision in 1945 was not made by an engine, a tank, or a flamethrower. It was made by a person who saw that others could not move unless he accepted the exposed position. Williams died on June 29, 2022, at 98, the last surviving Medal of Honor recipient from World War II. His remains lay in honor at the United States Capitol, yet his death did not close the central questions. What does a person owe the team that makes individual action possible? How should a nation remember courage without turning violence into spectacle? Williams answered by returning to the 4 riflemen, to Gold Star families, and to the idea that a medal is something held in trust. The surviving films show Iwo Jima without showing everything. National Archives footage records landing craft, tanks, infantry, explosions, flame-throwing vehicles, wounded men, and a landscape stripped by bombardment. Marine Corps video records Williams in later life. A tank shot can explain the machines and terrain, but it cannot be labeled as the exact tank he passed. A flame entering a cave can explain the weapon, but not his exact attack unless the archive proves it. That gap reminds us that testimony, citation, unit history, and terrain must carry what film cannot. The strongest part of Williams's story is not that fear vanished. Nothing in the evidence requires that myth. He understood the weapon on his back, the machine guns ahead, and the protection being provided by 4 Marines behind him. He also understood the consequence of remaining still. The tanks were not moving. The company was pinned. The pillboxes would continue firing. Courage was the choice to act inside that knowledge. It lasted long enough for an empty flamethrower to force a return, and then for a full one to require another advance. It lasted long enough for the action to stop being impulsive and become deliberate. Each trip forward renewed the decision, and measured how many times Williams had to choose the line again. At the end of the action, there was no cinematic silence over the island. Artillery still fired. Wounded men still waited for evacuation. Japanese positions remained ahead, and the battle would continue until March 26. Williams had helped his company pass one deadly obstacle in a campaign made of many. He did not capture Iwo Jima alone, and the flamethrower did not solve the island. He opened a route that had been closed, at a time when every closed route cost lives. The 4 riflemen made his approaches possible. 2 paid for that protection with their lives. The medal carried his name, but he carried them in its meaning. When the tanks could not break the line, 1 Marine went forward. When history tried to leave him there alone, Hershel Williams spent the rest of his life pointing back to the men who went with him.